I mean, let's face it, right? It is gonna be just those homilies where like you're just like it's so bad, but you get the point. Hi, my name is Tom, and this is Et Amor Evangeli. All right, let's face it, right? When we were little kids, the mass always seemed to be just a little bit more boring, right? I can remember as a little kid myself, I'd go to mass and at the time we just had this absolutely awful priest. He now isn't a priest anymore. He actually works in some sort of major business corporation. But anyways, he gave the absolute most boring homilies you can ever think of for any priest. And I feel like all of us kind of have those kind of priests in our lives, right? But he was just very, very boring with his homilies. And, as like a little like 7, 8 year old, you've already received First Communion, but you really don't know what First Communion is. You don't really understand it. You don't get the adult kind of comprehension of the Eucharist. So, during Mass, what I would do when I was like 7 or 8 years old is I would literally just fall asleep and take a nap in the middle of the homily. Now, keep in mind, the pews that were on the ground, they were like solid wooden, very hard wood pews. So they're not like the most comfortable thing in the world to sleep on, especially if it's like the middle of summer. But it just got so boring, and I would sleep for the homily, and my parents would get up for the prayers of the faithful, and they'd look down at me with like such a strange look, that I'm like, what are you doing? And it just got to that point where, I was still just napping through and just having my merry way, just not really getting it, and I don't think any of us at that age quite get a full understanding of what the Eucharist is or what a Mass is. But even as adults, even as young adults, we still tend to take the Eucharist for granted, right? When the pandemic closed everything down, we weren't able to go to Mass. And there have been a lot of people that still haven't gone back to Mass, especially the elderly and those who are at risk. But we also have to keep in mind, the Eucharist is our life, it's our salvation. The rest of the world just sees the Eucharist as a piece of bread or a wafer, but it's so much more. Why? Because we as Catholics believe that it is the full presence of Christ. It is Christ's most holy and precious body and blood. Now I'm gonna take out my little Bible over here. Yep, here we go. Sorry about that. And like literally all we have to do is just turn to the gospel, and Jesus tells us exactly what the Eucharist means. So let's go to Luke chapter 22, right? The Last Supper. So of course, the times come, Jesus knows he's going to be betrayed. And they have this Passover meal in front of him. And Jesus in verse 19 goes, then he took the bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which will be given for you. Do this in memory of me." And likewise the cup after they had eaten, saying, "This cup is the new covenant of my blood, which will be shed for you." Or let's go to John chapter 6, verse 35, right? The bread of life discourse. Jesus goes, so this is the exact quote from the Bible. Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never hunger, and whoever believes in me will never thirst." I mean, right there, Jesus tells us right off the bat in the gospel what the Eucharist means for us. Right off the bat. And we continue this theme, and we say it during Mass regardless of whether or not we understand that we're saying it. We say it at a specific prayer. And this prayer is said, the priest has kind of prepared all the gifts on the altar and that kind of thing. And it's the very first thing that we say after that, the very first part, very first thing we say in the liturgy, the Eucharist, and the Eucharistic prayer. So we say, May the Lord accept the sacrifice at your hands for the praise and glory of his name, for our good and the good of all his holy church. Think about that a minute. Now, I'm just going to break this down a little bit just so, you understand kind of what's going on here under the surface. So, first we say, may the Lord accept the sacrifice at your hands. Of course, this bread and wine being transformed into the body and blood is a sacrifice of Christ. And, that's just our normal prayer part. Okay, but in this prayer, we give the two purposes of the Mass. All right, so it's in the part where we talk about for the praise and glory of his name, for our good and good of all his holy church. So let's first take this little chunk here of for the praise and glory of his name, right? Any relationship is a give or take, right? So we can't just expect our husband or wife to just go and, we tell them what we want and that's the end of it. No, because any relationship, especially a relationship founded in marriage, is an intimate connection between a husband and a wife. And that intimate connection is found in the gift of sex. Now, I'm not saying at all that the Eucharist, Christ wants to have sex with us. He wants more than that. He wants so much more than that. So we're going to go into that now. A spouse gives themselves fully in marriage by, of course, having sex and reproducing, having kids. And by Christ, in this absolutely amazing gift of the Eucharist, he gives us an opportunity to have this intimate connection with him. Why? Because we literally consume Christ. We consume a part of him. So therefore, our own bodies become a dwelling place for Christ. Can you think of anything more intimate than that? Absolutely amazing. And again, the Eucharist is our giving of ourselves to God. So then we go into the fact of for our good and for the good of all his holy church, right? So for our good, let's take this little part. Our good, we spend time with Christ by going to Mass, by receiving the Eucharist. Again, Christ takes residence in us and he transforms our lives through his intimate connection in us. Absolutely amazing. And even further, when we start to talk about the Holy Church, by going to this Mass, we are connecting ourselves with the entire church, the entire world. Why? Because the Catholic Church is universal. Universal, of course, referring to, meaning all people, right? So the Catholic Church is universal. It includes all people. So by us going through this, it allows us to have that intimate connection and connects us with the church at large. Absolutely, absolutely amazing, right? So, where does this leave us? Well, it leaves us in a particular position, So next time you go to Mass, right? Try to think and remember what I told you about this prayer today. Because if you do, it'll transform the entire Mass for you. The Mass is not just about the homily. It's not by going out and saying, oh, I'm so ready. Now I'm going to go evangelize the world. Let's go. No, it's not about any of that. The Mass is about receiving the true presence of Christ in us and forming that intimate connection with him. And if we see it in this way, it will transform the entire Mass for us. I can guarantee it. So be joyful in the Mass and allow it to transform you and your life. Christ can do marvelous things through us. And by giving him the opportunity through the Mass to do it, you make a big difference on the world and on your connection to God. And that is an amazing thing. My name is Tom, and of course, this is Et Amor Evangeli.